Good morning. Thank you for joining us today for exploring U.S. DOT funding and financing tools and technical assistance grant programs. I'm Amy Luft, and I'm the communication coordinator at COMPAS, the Community Planning Association of Southwest Idaho. Today's presentation will be presented by Sarah Williams of the U.S. Department of Transportation's Build America Bureau, and the presentation is co-sponsored by Valley Regional Transit. COMPAS strives to reach out to all residents of Ada and Canyon counties. So please help us track how we are doing by participating in the poll that I'll be opening momentarily on your screen. Your responses are anonymous and your participation is completely voluntary. We appreciate your help. Thanks. Transportation funding can be a challenge. Do your agency's needs exceed its resources? COMPAS and Valley Regional Transit are excited today to host Sarah Williams from the U.S. Department of Transportation's Build America Bureau to share innovative funding and financing tools to help sponsors advance early stage infrastructure projects and assist with construction. Tools discussed will include the Transportation Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act, or TIFIA, and the Railroad Rehabilitation and Improvement Financing, or RRIF, as well as technical assistance grants and more. Before I introduce Sarah, I'll turn you over to Elaine Clegg, CEO of Valley Regional Transit, to share a few words. Elaine?
Thank you, Amy, and thank you everyone for being here. Really excited to co-host this webinar with COMPAS. As Amy said, we're very interested in understanding what tools we might be able to use that we haven't previously taken advantage of to help us reach some of our goals in this region. One of the things I'm very interested in as the new CEO at Valley Regional Transit is understanding how to make transit more relevant, understanding how to make transit take advantage of opportunities that both create the kinds of places that we need to support transit, as well as support Valley Regional Transit financially in some ways. We're hopeful that in looking at these tools, there is an opportunity in this region to think about places where we use them not just for hard infrastructure, but for some of the transit-oriented development ideas that are especially ripe on State Street right now on our bus rapid transit corridor and plan. So for those of you who have been working with Valley Regional Transit, know that those are the things we're thinking about as we listen today and learn about these tools, and hopefully that and other things are in the cards for this region so that we can take advantage of these tools and move forward in dealing with growth in a way that's more productive maybe than some other regions have been able to. So again, thanks for coming, and really excited to be here today.
Thank you, Elaine. Quick introduction of Sarah. Sarah Williams is a transit and transit-oriented project development lead at the U.S. Department of Transportation's Build America Bureau. She has over 14 years experience in transportation and structural engineering, supporting outreach and project development activities for the Bureau's rail, port, transit, and transit-oriented development programs. Sarah holds a master's degree in business administration from Loyola University, a master's in structural engineering from the University of Maryland, and a bachelor's in structural engineering from Bucknell University. Just a few quick housekeeping items before we start. First of all, for good sound quality, all participants have been muted. If you have questions, please type them in the chat box, and I will moderate the questions and pose those to Sarah at the end of the presentation. This presentation is being recorded and will be available later on COMPAS's YouTube channel, and the slides will also be available on COMPAS's website. Watch for emails and the COMPAS website for information on future COMPAS Education Series presentations. Also, if you have not already, please do complete the poll on your screen. Sarah, I will turn the screen over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amy. And I will go ahead and share screen. Can you see the slide?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Well, thank you everybody for having me. I'm also joined by my colleagues Alex Bond and Lindsay Teal. from the bill. And I apologize. I think I just got kicked out of Zoom.
Okay. Looks
Can
like
you
you're back.
You appear to be back, Sarah.
Thank you. Share screen again. Can we see it now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, I'll go ahead and get started. So as Amy mentioned, I'm Sarah Williams. I'm a project development lead here. So I'll start with a little bit of background about the Bureau itself. The Bureau was created 6 or 7 years ago, and it consolidated a number of programs across DOT into our single office.
It appears Sarah is having some technical difficulties. I'm going to let her log back in and see if perhaps I can share my screen and she can talk at the same time, and perhaps that will work. Alex, are you there in the office with Sarah?
I am not in the office. I'm about a block and a half away. I know there is some internet outages in the area, but I can deliver a couple of slides here while she logs back in, if that would be helpful.
That would be
Sure.
wonderful.
So, Alex Bond. I'm also with the Build America Bureau. I'm also with I kind of split time with the Office of the Assistant Secretary for Policy. So the Build America Bureau, right, it is 7 years old. It was created out of Federal Highway Administration mostly, but has brought in other parts of DOT to consolidate all of the lending programs that were part of the department. And then in the last couple of years, it has really shifted its role to not only still have the loans, but begin thinking about funding packages and be a place for intake and technical assistance. And that's the part that I have come to the Bureau to help stand up, and we'll be talking about today. We have not only the informal one-on-one technical assistance and kind of the intake meetings like we're having here, but there actually are some funding opportunities to explore both grants and loans that may be coming, or may be eligible for. And while Sarah's coming back in, I'm not entirely clear what the next slide is, but I gave them the introduction to the Bureau. You can move on to the next slide if that would be your preference.
Thank you, Alex.
I do apologize for that. Thanks, Alex. I appreciate it. Can everybody hear me now? Hopefully this is the last glitch.
Yes.
So just a little bit from
Oh boy, Amy, are you able to pull it up on your end?
I will pull up. Oh, you're back, Sarah. That was very fast.
I apologize. I do not know what's going on with my Zoom today.
Might be worth not being on video, Sarah.
Yeah, let's try that. Okay. Okay. So the Bureau itself, we sit within the Office of the Secretary here at DOT. We have 3 primary groups: our outreach and project development team, that's where I sit as a PDL, our credit office, and then our technical assistance office. When a sponsor approaches us with a project, generally you work with our outreach and project development folks first, and then as the project progresses further along, that's when you would work with our credit office. I will say the Bureau, we do not work in a silo. We work across our modes to help progress projects forward. So depending on the nature of the project, we'll work with FHWA, FTA, FRA. They're definitely strategic partners for us. They're very familiar with federal requirements that need to be navigated. And even when we work with the local and regional offices, they know how to navigate local conditions like the political landscape to help progress projects forward. So the Bureau itself, we have a lending capacity of about $100 billion across our TIFIA and RRIF loan programs. a reminder, these are loan programs, they are not grants. So some sponsors might be wondering, why would I try to go for a loan when I could try to go for a grant instead? Grants, you don't have to pay back, while loans you do have to. The reality is that DOT's grant programs are largely oversubscribed. Even with the infrastructure bill, there are a lot of good projects with still only so much money to go around. Meanwhile, our loan programs, they are not competitive programs. So if a project and borrower are determined to be eligible, if they can meet federal requirements and prove that they can repay the loan, then they should be able to receive funding from the appropriate loan program. So diving a little bit more into our financing programs, I will say that our loan programs are often sistered with other federal grants. So we've had sponsors that have been awarded RAISE grants or infra grants or CRISI grants, just as an example. And sponsors usually also identify a local source of funding as well. As I mentioned, these are loan programs, they're not grants, so sponsors do need to pay back the money. However, TIFIA and RRIF loans are considered part of the local financial match to any federal grants that you do apply to, since the local sponsor has to repay the loan. So starting with TIFIA, TIFIA is more focused on surface transportation projects. So we've traditionally been able to fund transit projects, highway projects. That has been expanded to include airports and transit-oriented development projects that qualify as public infrastructure. I will say in general with TOD, I have some dedicated slides to run you through TOD in a little more detail in just a few slides. So TIFIA, a project has to cost at least $10 million, and that's the total eligible costs. And we can fund up to 33% of eligible project costs. That has been expanded under our TIFIA 49 program. So for transit and TOD public infrastructure projects, we can actually fund up to 49% of eligible project costs. Under TIFIA, total federal assistance, so any grants plus loans, is capped at 80% of the project cost, so that is something to keep in mind. So at least 20% would have to be non-federal. Under TIFIA, the government subsidizes the credit risk. So in turn, sponsors are required to provide an investment grade rating for the project. And that is the responsibility of the sponsor to provide, and needs to come from a nationally recognized credit rating agency. So think of Moody's or a Fitch or an S&P. Any of those would work. Sponsors also need to have a repayment source that has a history of generating enough revenue to pay off the loan, and it needs to be a secured source. So the source needs to be at least partially dedicated to repaying the loan for the project. Switching to RRIF, RRIF is more focused on railroad work. So we can fund projects like commuter rail lines or intercity passenger rail or freight rail. RRIF, we do also have the authority to fund some TOD projects that provide economic development. So it's a little different from TIFIA. Again, I'll get into those nuances in just a few slides. RRIF has no minimum project cost or maximum loan value. We can actually fund up to 100% of eligible costs for railroad projects, and then up to 75% of costs for those TOD economic development types of projects. RRIF's a little different from TIFIA, as the government does not subsidize the credit risk. So the borrower is not required to provide an investment grade rating for a RRIF loan. However, the borrower does have to pay a credit risk premium, which gets repaid to the borrower with interest when the loan is repaid. Our underwriters do have an equation that goes into calculating the credit risk premium, or CRP as we call it. There are a number of factors that can be looked at for that. Some sponsors will provide a rating to help calculate that credit risk premium. The rating would not need to be investment grade, but the better the rating, that should help get a lower CRP. I'll also touch on private activity bonds, or PABs. These are not credit assistance, they're tax exempt bonds. They're allocated by DOT and issued by a conduit agency. And they're allocated to projects that have a private entity attached to them. And that private entity would have to pay the debt service. They're really more designed for highway or freight transfer projects. There could be a little flexibility in that. If people have further questions on that, we can definitely put you in touch with one of our PABS experts. We do not underwrite PABs, and taking out PABs alone does not federalize a project, so you wouldn't need to meet federal requirements. However, PABs can be combined with a TIFIA or RRIF loan. However, that would federalize a project, so you would need to meet those federal requirements. So some of the benefits of the our credit programs. We offer long repayment periods of up to 35 years. We even have the authority to go up to 75 years. It's not a guarantee necessarily for every project, but we do have that authority. And our underwriters would help you determine what type of loan duration you'd be eligible for. We even have the ability to defer the start of repayments up to 5 years after substantial completion for some projects. However, the repayment period cannot exceed the useful life of the project. We offer low interest rates that are based on the treasury rate at loan close. The treasury rate that applies is the one that most closely aligns with the duration of the loan that you take out. So if you were to take out a 10-year loan, we'd look at the 10-year rate. If you were to take out a 30-year loan, we'd look at the 30-year rate. And as of yesterday, for a 30 or 35-year loan, the rate was 3.77%, which, as we understand, is quite competitive compared to private financing options right now. We do only finance capital projects. We do not finance operations and maintenance. So I want to touch on our rural project initiative under TIFIA. This is one of our special programs, and it's designed to support projects in rural areas. We define rural as an area outside of urbanized areas with populations greater than 150,000. So I believe outside the Boise proper area, this could definitely be eligible for some projects. It's designed for projects that are over $10 million, but less than $100 million. And there are some benefits, the main one being that project sponsors can actually secure a loan for half that treasury rate that I mentioned on the previous slide. So for a 30 or 35-year loan, as of yesterday, the rate would actually be 1.89%. There are some other benefits. We can cover borrower fees that are associated with their loans. So it's definitely makes projects more affordable for sponsors. And to date, we've closed about a half dozen of these loans. So that's definitely something to consider for your potential projects. So diving a little bit into eligible projects and borrowers. Again, starting with TIFIA, again, it's more surface transportation focused, so we can do transit projects, highway project, roadway projects, biped infrastructure. We can even do intelligent transportation systems, seaports, airports, and as I mentioned, TOD that qualifies as public infrastructure. Eligible TIFIA borrowers are traditional borrowers like government entities, government-sponsored authorities, state infrastructure banks. Private entities can be an eligible TIFIA borrower. However, private entities are required to have public sponsorship. So what that means is the public sponsor doesn't need to be on the loan itself, but it needs to be working with that private entity to make sure a TIFIA project is programmed into a TIP and or STIP, or Transportation Improvement Plan, State Transportation Improvement Plan. So that's something to keep in mind for TIFIA. RRIF, again, is more railroad focused. So we can do railroad work, we can do seaports serviced by rail. We can also do TOD, centered around rail infrastructure that qualifies that supports economic development. RRIF borrowers, eligible RRIF borrowers include railroads, can be class 1, 2, or 3 railroads, can be government entities, government-sponsored authorities. Private entities can be sponsors as well, are eligible sponsors. However, they would need to make sure that they're in a joint venture with a railroad or a government or another eligible borrower that could speak to the benefits of the project. When we say JV, we describe it as lowercase JV. Basically, the private sponsor would need to make sure that there's an agreement in place between all of the parties that are part of that JV. That's in that agreement needs to speak to the mutual responsibilities and contributions and benefit for each of the partners involved. So I mentioned the benefits a few slides ago. Now we're going to get into some of the program requirements. This is the flip side. When a sponsor comes to us with a project, one of our OAs, so FTA or FHWA or FRA, for instance, provides oversight for that project. I will say the Bureau itself, we do not have our own set of federal requirements that need to be met, but you would need to meet the federal requirements of that OA that provides project oversight. This is a list of some of the big requirements that do apply, regardless of mode, regardless of type of project. And I imagine some people in the audience are familiar with some of these, but you would need to make sure you meet NEPA requirements, Buy America requirements, Uniform Relocation Assistance requirements, Davis-Bacon. And then, of course, there would be planning and programming requirements that would need to be met and just other modal requirements that would arise that you would be able to coordinate with ROAs on. So that's something to keep in mind, especially in terms of timeline, because I know people are interested in getting things funded quickly, and particularly with NEPA, obviously that can take some time to navigate. We definitely would encourage sponsors to try to meet these in tandem as you're trying to close on a loan. So TIFIA 49 initiative, this was enacted not that long ago, a few months ago, I believe. And basically, this is what increased our ability to increase TIFIA, our TIFIA lending capacity to 49% for transit projects and TOD public infrastructure projects. So we can fund up to 49% of eligible costs for transit and TOD under our TIFIA program. So this is where I'm going to get a little bit more into transit-oriented development. I will caveat transit-oriented development is a newer program for the Bureau right now. So we definitely have a lot of interest. There are some requirements that we are still navigating internally. But this is definitely, this information is what is in statute with what we can do that I'm happy to share with you today. So this slide captures the different layers that we can fund in terms of TOD projects and eligible costs. And I have a slide for each one. We can do surface transportation projects. That's our bread and butter. There are two paths to eligibility under TIFIA through joint development projects or public infrastructure projects. And then under RRIF, path to eligibility is economic development projects. So starting with surface transportation projects, under our loan programs, we can fund projects that are eligible under Title 23 or Title 49, Chapter 53 projects. So in other words, we can fund any projects that are eligible for FHWA grant programs or FTA grant programs, respectively. And that can include the types of stations and facilities that are listed here. The stations and facilities that are listed, these are the ones that act as the TOD qualifying stations. So the path to TOD eligibility depends on what type of station the project is being built around. So I'll start, the first is fixed guideway transit stations or facilities. I know you mentioned the interest in the bus rapid transit corridor. So bus rapid transit would qualify as fixed guideway transit. We define bus rapid transit as at least 50% of the directional route miles. is operated in a separate right-of-way for exclusive use of the service. But bus rapid transit does qualify as fixed guideway transit. We can also, other forms of fixed guideway transit include rail, could be ferry, light rail, commuter rail, cable car. Those are some other types of fixed guideway transit that we have the ability to do. Rail modes do need to be passenger rail modes. So that's something to keep in mind. We can also fund, and another eligible facility is one that services intercity bus. We define intercity bus as one that serves between two urbanized areas or connects a rural area to an urbanized area. And there would need to be limited stops on that route. So a great example would be a Greyhound service, for instance, that would be eligible as intercity bus. Intercity passenger rail, that's one that, is either a commuter rail. Commuter rail can actually be eligible under TIFIA and RRIF, but other examples of intercity passenger rail are Amtrak's probably the biggest one in the United States. So, but we can also do like Alaska Railroad or Brightline or other modes of intercity passenger rail like that. And then, of course, any station or facility that has a combination of any of these services could be an eligible facility. So joint development, this is the first of the two paths to eligibility under TIFIA, the second being public infrastructure. So basically, in order to be eligible for joint development, there needs to be a very close relationship to the qualifying station. There's a broader spectrum of what a qualifying station or facility could be, but there needs to be a much closer relationship to that facility. So there either needs to be physical integration to the station, or so for instance, you're either sharing a structure with the station, or it's being built on station property and you're leasing from, for instance, a transit agency that owns the land for that facility. We would also need to see that there's an agreement in place between all of the parties involved in order to qualify for joint development. Joint development projects also need to satisfy the eligibility criteria that's listed here. So we would need to see that it creates an economic development by enhancing economic, it creates an economic benefit, I apologize. That it would create a transit benefit, that it provides a fair share of revenue for transit, and that occupants pay a fair share of the cost to operate and maintain it, for instance. So something to keep in mind. The next path to eligibility for TOD is projects that qualify as public infrastructure. In order to be eligible for TIFIA as public infrastructure, the project would need to be within walking distance of an eligible facility. So we define walking distance as, we use industry standards, so it would need to be within half a mile. And we want to see that there is some sort of connectivity and it's accessible for people from that would utilize the project to access that facility. So we can fund horizontal public infrastructure. So think roads or utilities or stormwater management systems, foundations, bike ped facilities, parks, and we can fund vertical public infrastructure. So think public buildings like civic centers or libraries or facilities that offer community service like daycare, healthcare, education, or job training. We can't fund strictly commercial housing or commercial vertical development. Housing can be a little bit of a gray area for us right now, I admit. On the spectrum of housing, I'd say if you were to look at public housing, for strictly public housing, I'd see a good path to eligibility under TIFIA. If it were strictly market rate, that would be a very hard sell. We've certainly had sponsors that have approached us about mixed use development that has some public housing or affordable housing. That is still a bit of a gray area that we're navigating on our end, but we are working towards trying to find paths to eligibility under this. So next is RRIF, economic development. So under RRIF, we can finance economic development projects, and this can include residential and commercial infrastructure. There are a number of requirements that do apply. The project would need to incorporate private investment of greater than 20% of the total project costs. It would need to be within half a mile of a station with rail service, so an intercity passenger rail like an Amtrak or commuter rail. The sponsor would need to be able to prove that it could begin the construction contracting process within 90 days after closing on the loan. The project would need to generate new revenue through increasing ridership or through tenant lease payments. And we could look at other options as well as to how it could generate new revenue. And then it would need to incorporate a non-federal match of at least 25%. So a RRIF loan could hypothetically fund 75% of the project. 20% could be private investment, and then 5% could be state or local. For instance, that could be an example of the breakdown of costs. So I know that was a lot of information. So now I'm going to get into the process for our loan programs. We follow a 4-phase process here at the Bureau. Generally, we start things out with an initial consultation. So hopefully this webinar was informative, but if one of you had a project in mind, you'd be able to reach out to us. We could set up an initial consult to talk through the details about your project. So in an initial engagement, that's where we educate you on our programs. We hash out some details to help define your project and identify your loan needs, and have any other conversations that you feel would be beneficial. And then we would have you submit a draft letter of interest. We do have a template. It has very defined questions. I'd be happy to share this with the group afterwards. But you would submit that draft LOI, as we call it. I will say LOI development is an iterative process. So I know with a lot of grants, you'll submit an application and then you wait to hear back. We are here to work with you. We really want to help get your projects funded. So we'll work with you in the development of the LOI. We'll provide feedback to you. We can go through as many iterations as you need on the LOI. We certainly don't expect you to submit your complete final LOI up front. You're more than welcome to, but it's an iterative process. As we get further information from you and work in the project development phase, on our end, we would perform an eligibility analysis, a preliminary eligibility analysis, and that's where we'd evaluate, are you as the sponsor eligible and is the project eligible for our loan programs? So you'd continue to work with us on that LOI and submit a final LOI, and it would need to be accompanied by a complete financial model and an indicative rating for the TIFIA loans. So once you're determined to be eligible and you get through and you submit the final LOI and all the accompanying documents, that's when you would be invited to enter the creditworthiness review phase. And that's when you'd really start to work more with our underwriting team. I will say the Bureau brings in, at this point, financial and legal advisors that the borrower does need to pay for. And as I mentioned, that's a benefit of our rural project initiative because we could potentially cover the fees associated with bringing in those advisors. So basically in the creditworthiness review phase, that's when you'd work with our underwriters to hash out details to close on the loan, do financial due diligence, negotiate terms and conditions. As you get further along, you would be invited to submit a more formal application to our underwriters, and you'd continue to work with them until you closed on the loan. I will say you would need to provide that final rating prior to closing on the loan. And then once you close on the loan, that's when you enter the portfolio management phase. That's when we provide financial oversight, monitor disbursements, and loan repayments until you finish paying out on the loan. And that's our process. I will say on average, we recommend that sponsors reach out to us at least a year in advance of when they want to close on the loan. The creditworthiness review phase on average takes about I'd say 8 to 12 months. Depends on the complexity of the project and the sponsor and everything like that. So, but we definitely encourage you to reach out to us early. That'll be helpful to help meet your timelines. And those are our loan programs. So next, I'm going to talk about our technical assistance programs and resources. We have quite a few. This is the second part of our mission here at the Bureau. The technical assistance, these are, for the most part, they are grants, they're not loans, and they're designed to provide seed money for projects that are in really early phases, like conceptual or even napkin phase, to really help them stand them up and move them forward. They're certainly not designed to fund projects all the way through construction, though. So our first technical assistance service is our Build America Center. It's actually a collaboration with FHWA, the Build America Bureau, and 5 different universities. It's designed to mobilize the use of innovative financing and project delivery solutions to foster new approaches to transportation projects. So it leads research, it can provide innovative training, provides customized technical assistance in support of the implementation of the bipartisan infrastructure law. It's designed to support FHWA and the Build America Bureau and other modal administrations to help deliver projects. And with the Build America Center, it engages state DOTs in their work to support project sponsors and help modernize their transportation systems. Next is our Thriving Communities. A new round is coming soon. We did recently award last year's round. The way it's designed, it's not necessarily grant. Localities don't win a grant, but they receive multiple years of free consulting services from our capacity builders. And I believe the city of Rexburg is one of our Thriving Communities recipients. So basically, under Thriving Communities, DOT brings in advisors to support communities with planning and technical assistance and capacity building. It's really designed to help disadvantaged and under-resourced communities advance their projects that increase mobility, reduce pollution, and expand affordable transportation options. And it connects communities to other opportunities and resources that they might not have access to help them really thrive. DOT actually announced over $21 million in cooperative agreements with 4 capacity builders through that first round of funding that we had. And those capacity builders are supporting 64 communities in 42 states, including 6 tribal nations and Puerto Rico. The FY 2023 Thriving Communities Program opportunity for capacity builders and communities is expected to open later on this summer. So we definitely encourage you to keep an eye out for that announcement. So our rural and tribal assistance pilot program, the NOFA was actually published in mid-June, so very recently, and the application window is set to open August 14th. I will say this is a recurring program. It's an annual program and it will come back in 2024, but certainly feel free to take a look at this year's NOFO. This is the first round and we're actually doing double the normal amount at $3.4 million this year for this first round. We will accept applications on a rolling basis. It's a $10 million 5-year program, and it offers funds to states, local governments, tribes, and the Department of Hawaiian Homelands to advance early stage infrastructure projects. And the funds can be used to hire legal, financial, and technical advisors. And there is no local match requirement for the Rural and Tribal Assistance Pilot Program. We have our regional infrastructure accelerators. We had a round recently, and we're currently reviewing those applications. We are authorized to have annual competitions through FY 2026, so there are definitely future opportunities to go after our regional infrastructure accelerator opportunity. Basically, it's designed to create an accelerator, as we call it, to explore a regional program of projects. And it's intended to help jumpstart projects. And when we say region, you know, we're pretty flexible in how we define region. It could be, there's one out that's the Pacific Northwest. There's one that I believe is just a county. And so it's not necessarily your typical geographic boundaries that could be qualify as a region under our regional infrastructure accelerators. But these accelerators, this program helps incubate projects to get them built faster. And our program really funds accelerators that are bridge between the Bureau and local project sponsors. So it's designed to help open the door to more money, to the billions of dollars that are available through the Bureau's loan programs for projects. We also have our DOT Navigator. This is a new resource, and it's to help communities understand the best ways to apply for grants and to plan for and deliver their projects and services. I do have a link to our DOT Navigator, and I have subsequent slides for each of these, but it's really designed to act as a central dashboard and to help people access the different TA resources. And then finally, we have our innovative finance program. This is going to be coming out soon, within the next few months. Again, this is an annual program, and it will be reappearing not just this year, but in future years as well. It is also going to, this first round is going to be double the typical funding. But it's designed to fund state and local government technical, financial, and legal advisory service costs for alternative project delivery. And it can be used to help entities evaluate assets that can be monetized. And that can include underutilized assets. An example of this could be a surface parking lot that a transit agency owns, and they decide they want to lease it to a developer to build some sort of vertical development and try to make some additional revenue. And then, as I mentioned, we have slides and links for each of these. If you want more information, I'm happy to share this deck with the group afterwards, so you can have access to all of these resources. And those are our programs. I know that was a lot of information, so I'd like to pass it back to Amy and see if there are any questions.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sarah. We do have a couple of questions in the chat. Also, just a reminder to everyone, we will post the slide deck on the Compass website after the presentation, so you'll be able to access the slides there as well. First question is, can parking structures be built using TIFIA?
I guess, yes. I think there could be a path to eligibility for parking structures. There could be different paths to eligibility. It would definitely be helpful to have follow-up conversations to learn a little bit more about the project specifically. For instance, is it going to be around an eligible rail station or transit station or bus rapid transit station? So there could be a path to eligibility for parking structures, and we can certainly talk about that more if you'd like to have a follow-up conversation.
Great, thank you. This one's a little more complicated. If an applicant wanted to use a TIFIA RPI loan to match the 20% for a discretionary grant, could they apply for the loan and then have the commitment in place prior to applying for the discretionary grant program?
That's a good question. So I will say the Bureau wants to see fully funded projects. We do want to see fully funded projects. We certainly have sponsors that work on applying for one of our loans while they are applying for discretionary grants. We've had sponsors that say, you know, we are trying to go after these grants. This is the amount of money we're hoping to get when they submit that letter of interest to us. But it's helpful to have all, we do want to, when we close on a loan, we want to have a fully funded project. I will say that.
And let me just quickly add on a bit with that. it is tough, of course, to make all the clocks strike midnight at the same time. But the discretionary grant programs, when you apply for a loan, it doesn't immediately disperse the funds. So you can have those things in place, and it doesn't mean that your loan begins then. Your loan begins when you withdraw. So it can help bridge some gap. It is unlikely, though, of course, that you would get a fully funded project, as Sarah just said, through the credit underwriting process, if you hadn't had a line on some of the discretionary grants. So there's some flexibility, but that's something that our credit team and our project development folks will help with, and help line that thing up for you.
And this next question, I think maybe is for you also, Alex.
Okay.
Could you describe more about the Innovative Finance Program?
Right, the Innovative Finance and Asset Concession Program. It's, if those of you who want to dust off legislation, it's 71001 is the section number in the bipartisan infrastructure law. This grant is at 100% federal share, so should be super appealing, at least for the first $1 million. The goal here is to advance project concepts toward further down the project development pipeline and explore the funding opportunities that the Bureau has, and honestly that the private sector has, that can support the project. So the funds are not to build the project. The funds are to hire needed legal, financial experts to do some early environmental screening, these kinds of things that help tee up a project to go out and pursue funding. We have $20 million a year to give out for this. By the way, the grants can be used for contractors of your choice, with some limitations, of course, on their capabilities and using the funds correctly, but it can also be used in select cases to hire staff. So there's $1 million available, another $1 million if you'd like to contribute some local funds toward it. So we have 20 million a year, 100 million in total. We'll be making 2 years worth available here in the next couple of months. And we'll have a whole rollout series for this. I put the website up here. Please go on there and subscribe to our notifications, that you'll find out when these things come out. You can also find these sorts of things in the DOT Navigator. So in short, the Innovative Finance Program is to do some early stage exploration. The only real limitation there is we are hoping that people have a suite of projects or some projects in mind when they come into it. It really isn't intended to be really foundational, but we hope that it will advance the pipeline of projects with some people who haven't had a chance to participate in the P3 space or participate in anything with the Bureau before.
Thank you, Alex. Excuse me, can you explain how to use the value of the loan on a project as a local match? I think that one is back to you, Sarah.
Okay. So basically, because with the loans, the sponsor is required to pay it back. So if you apply for a grant, and there's usually a local match that you need to provide, our loan can act as that local match to the federal grant that you're applying to, because the sponsor does have to pay for the loan.
So it is not considered federal money matching other federal money.
Correct. It's considered the local match.
And depending, let me say, also depending on the relationship with the state and others, like doesn't mean that you have to line up the local match just for discretionary grants. This could be something that you could contribute through loan payments for formula funds. That would not be the Bureau, of course. That would be our colleagues at like Federal Highways or Federal Transit.
Great,
Or
thank you.
FRA. Yeah.
That is all of the questions that we have in the chat. I'll give just another second or two in case anyone else has a question to add at this point. Seeing none, we are actually finished just a little bit early. But thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Alex, for your insights and all of your really valuable information today. As a reminder to everyone, we will post these slides on the Compass website, and we will post the video of today's presentation on the Compass YouTube channel. So you will have both of those available to go back and refer to. I will be sending out an evaluation via email as soon as we have both of those posted, and I will include the links to the YouTube and the PDF of the slides in the same email where I send out the evaluation form, so you have everything all at once. Once again, please be watching your email and Compass's social media for our future education series presentations. Our next one is coming up in August, and we'll be dealing with safety and striving towards Vision Zero. So with that, I would like to thank first Elaine and Valley Regional Transit for co-sponsoring this with us. And then thank you, Sarah and Alex and our other partners at the Build America Bureau for some really great information today. I appreciate it. And finally, thank you all for attending and for the great questions. I wish everyone a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.